As any regular commuter knows, there is simply no point in getting the tube from Embankment to Charing Cross. They're so close together that you can practically see one from the other. They might as well be the same station. In fact, when the District Railway first opened its station on the Thames Embankment, they were the same station. Embankment was called Charing Cross when it first opened in 1870. It made a certain degree of sense. The main line terminus was right next door, after all. The Baker Street and Waterloo Railway, now the Bakerloo line, arrived in 1906, but even though the stations were linked, the Bakerloo decided to name their station Embankment. Well, this might make sense, because as we know, the Bakerloo station immediately to the north of Embankment is called Charing Cross already. Except back then it wasn't. Back then it was called Trafalgar Square. In 1907, the Charing Cross, Euston and Hampstead Railway, more commonly known as the Hampstead Tube, now the Charing Cross branch of the Northern Line, got in on the game. They built a station at Charing Cross, which they called Charing Cross, and at Embankment, which they called Embankment. So, are we clear so far? Good. By 1907, Embankment Station was called Charing Cross by the district, and Embankment by the Bakerloo and Northern lines, or what would become those lines. Meanwhile, Charing Cross was called Charing Cross by the Northern line, but Trafalgar Square by the Bakerloo line, and wasn't called anything by the district line because their station was at Embankment, not Charing Cross. Have you got the hang of that? Cool. In 1914, it changed again. In 1914, the Northern Line decided to rename its stations. Charing Cross became Charing Cross Strand, and Embankment Charing Cross Embankment. So they had two stations named Charing Cross because that was exactly what everyone was asking for. The Bakerloo also got in on the renaming fun, joining the Northern in renaming Embankment to Charing Cross Embankment, even though Trafalgar Square was also right next to Charing Cross Main Line. Got that? Bad news. It changed again in 1915. The Northern Line station at Charing Cross was renamed Strand, except there was already a station named Strand which had opened in 1907 and was on the Great Northern Piccadilly and Brompton Railway, or as we will call it, the Piccadilly Line. It was right up at the other end of the Strand, so that was confusing. Except rather than say, hey, we were here first, the Piccadilly decided to get in on the renaming fun and change Strand to Aldwych. Meanwhile, the Bakerloo got restless and decided to change Charing Cross Embankment to plain old Charing Cross. They stuck with this for a while until 1973 when they decided to change things up again. The Northern Line station at Charing Cross, now called Strand, remember, closed altogether. In 1974, the Bakerloo, Northern and District lines all got together and decided to rename Embankment Station to Charing Cross Embankment, and in 1976 to plain old Embankment. In 1979, a new line muscled in at Charing Cross, namely the Jubilee. A new Northern Line station was opened at the same time and named Charing Cross. For the first time, the Bakerloo, Northern and Jubilee line were connected at this site, and so the old Bakerloo line at Trafalgar Square was renamed to reflect this, and also took the name Charing Cross. In 1994, the station at Aldwych, at the far end of the Strand, closed down. 5 years later, the Jubilee line was diverted, and so the Jubilee platforms at Charing Cross were closed to all except Thor. And that's where we are today. That is the tale of Charing Cross, Embankment, Trafalgar Square, Aldwych, Charing Cross Strand, Charing Cross Embankment, Charing Cross Embankment with Embankment in brackets, Strand, Aldwych, and Strand. Make sense? Of course not. Hi all. Thanks for watching this nominal episode of Tales from the Tube. Please feel free to like, to subscribe and to share, and to leave comments expressing how unclear this video was. And I'll see you soon for another Tale from the Tube.